Welcome to the Together.eu Ireland podcast. We are a community of people who believe in democracy and who want to give it real meaning as the next European elections approach. Together.eu is a project run by the European Parliament, dedicated to getting as many people as possible involved in the democratic life of Europe. It is a community of individual citizens across the EU. This week, we will be talking with us, the volunteers from the Together.eu team. So welcome to our final Together.eu Ireland podcast, right before the June 7th elections that are very much looming. We've been together since August, so it's been quite a few months putting together all our actions and, getting people out there to vote via social media and putting together our events. But something that we haven't talked about is how the voting system works in Ireland, especially for people that may have never voted before. So the European Parliament elections is the same voting process. It's still the single transferable vote that we use in Ireland. And I'm going to just throw it over to Dan to explain a bit more on that.
So I suppose people will always say when a candidate will knock on your door, they'll ask for your number one, and then if they're with the same party or there's multiple candidates running under a ticket, you'll give the number one to the candidate that's asking for it, and number two to their running mate, and so on. So people have the choice that you can use your number one vote, and you don't have to fill in the numbers down along the list depending on the number of candidates in your constituency. And if you do choose to fill out the numbers from, say, for argument's sake, we have 10 candidates and you fill out from numbers 1 to 10, it's important to remember that there is a situation where the number 10 vote you give could likely be the difference in someone being elected and not elected. So the process is pretty simple. On the first count, all the number one votes are counted, and if a candidate exceeds the quota, his surplus is then spread out over the remaining candidates across the field. So if candidate goes over the quota, that surplus is spread over the candidates, and the number twos for that candidate are then spread out across, and so on. So that's pretty much how our electoral system works. It's probably the fairest system possible for how candidates are elected.
And yeah, I guess it's important that, like that we were kind of speaking earlier, there's 20 odd candidates nearly for each constituency that, you don't have to write 1 to 20.
No, you don't. It's very much a preference. But I suppose it's just the point I was trying to make is that it's you can people that it's important to remember that our electoral system allows you select candidates from your favorite to your least favorite, and that least favored vote can still make a difference in someone getting elected potentially.
And choosing a candidate can be difficult. Choosing who your first preference, second preference, third preference will go to. And I guess that just comes down to asking the candidates when they come knocking on your door and finding out information that you can about what they're going to do. Never mind the political groups and the political groups in Europe where they'd be going to as well. I know it can be difficult for people to understand how Europe works. So it's definitely important that you're aware of the issues that are important to you and what the candidates are saying when you're choosing your preferred candidate.
Just I think another point in that area as well, Deirdre, just following from what you're saying, it's also important to just bear in mind that the candidates that are selected, they obviously are going to a parliament in Brussels and Strasbourg, and they're there as an independent person, and you need to take some sort of view about how well qualified you think they are, that they're going to be able to represent the views, put across their views, their knowledge, their general understanding, because they're not going to have a huge support system. They'll be judged on what they do and how effective they are, and how confident they are, how knowledgeable they are. So it's important that when you're looking at a candidate, that's one aspect you certainly should be considering, apart from what you already said there.
And I suppose just from a perspective from us at Together.eu, why are each of you voting?
Okay. Well, will I jump off? Okay, so I mean, EU voting. I think it's important. It's important that we all vote, and I regard voting as an important practice, something that I've done for many years. Our vote can have an impact in Europe on different types of things that are very important to us all. Obviously migration is a huge issue at the moment around, and what happens in Europe also can have a big impact on what happens in Ireland. Climate change is another area that has a big impact on everyone, and what happens in Europe is really leading the way from a European point of view. So those kinds of issues and defense is another area. We see all the trouble and strife that we have in Europe and Middle East. So defense is more and more, unfortunately, will play a part in our thinking about Europe. And so, Europe has its own views of what needs to happen there. So, Ireland will obviously be playing a role in trying to make its view known there. But these are all important issues from a European point of view, and I think European candidates, and these are the reasons why I think it's important that my vote is recorded for the candidates that I think will best look after those areas.
Yeah, I can go next. I'm voting just because I think the crises that the EU are facing in the coming years are extremely serious, and they can have a massive effect on Ireland, the EU, and the world in its entirety. There's the authoritarian rule of law crises in Poland and Hungary. There's the Ukrainian invasion of Ukraine, and then there's the Israel-Palestine conflict. And whoever is selected to be our MEPs are going to be the ones dealing with that, and the ones representing how we feel, and the ones striving towards what we think is right in regards to those issues. And I think it's very important to show MEPs and to prove to the politicians that are running that we are going to pay attention and that we're listening. And a good voter turnout is the way to do that, because if they know that people are going to come out and vote and they won't be able to just get away with, not doing their job correctly, they'll do their job properly and they'll represent us sufficiently on the world stage.
Yeah, I think for me, and I mean, since I was born, women have been able to vote, but has not always been the case, and I'm quite conscious of that. And especially, the phrases of history repeating itself and things like that I know that, not to take anything for granted. And I'm voting because I can, as a woman, I have that right. And I want to keep that right. But also, I think it's important that we have people out there that represent people, whether, that's men or women or your sexual orientation or your religion or whatever that might be. I think all voices need to be heard. And I think all voices should be at the table. So that's why I feel like it's so important that me as that one voice can vote, and I get to vote on what I believe in. And the big issues, especially climate change and defense, that's coming up now, and a new world order, almost we don't know what the American elections, we don't know how that's going to go, and what our relationships are going to be with other countries, with the BRICS countries that are coming up from the more developed countries, and China and all of that. So there is a lot to think about in terms of those big issues, but also slightly smaller issues that the EU does for us as well. Even in terms of when I first did my Erasmus in 2017, in January 2017, I couldn't use my phone in another country. There was roaming charges. I couldn't just go to another country and use my data as if I was in Ireland. That wasn't a thing, and now it is. So even just little things like that that make our lives easier are there as well. So it's, not always such a big thing, but our vote matters so much, even just for the smaller things.
I think for me, my reason for voting is that I've always exercised my vote. But I think in recent years and from listening even to some of the Together.eu videos and the European Parliament videos that have gone out, that looking at the generations that have gone before us, our vote isn't a right, it's a privilege. And I think it's important that we exercise it. I read something there recently that was from Plato, a Greek philosopher, where he basically said those who refuse to partake in politics end up being ruled by evil men, which essentially meant was that if you want to have your say and you want to, you want the world, shape the world in the way you view it, you need to exercise your vote. And it's important to do that. And it's something that I encourage others to do. And probably the reason I got involved in the first place.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way since last August when we all first met in the European Parliament Liaison Office in Dublin. And I suppose from my perspective, I just want to say thank you to you and to everyone that came along to our events, that engaged with us on social media, that followed us and watched our podcasts. To everyone like that. And I think we did receive a good bit of engagement, and we still have another event tomorrow with a table quiz in Tipperary for people to come along to. So I think just reflecting on what we've done, we have done a bit for the small, team that we had here. So I'm just very grateful that people are interested in the EU as well, and politics in general for a better world.
I think there's no doubt that we definitely made a bit of an impact, and like we've covered a range of demographics, and we've traveled around. We've been in most of corners of Ireland, and with different types of events, be them online or be them in person. And I think we're kind of going to close it off now with a kind of a lighthearted type of an event with a table quiz. So I think it's a nice way to kind of close it tomorrow. But I think the important thing is for anyone watching and for anyone that's engaged, I think the one message maybe to take from the experts we've brought on and the different people and politicians we've engaged with is that regardless what way you're going to vote, use your vote. Like, it's a bit of I don't know your own feelings when talking to people from around your own constituency, but even as near as yesterday, like I met a couple of young people that were basically saying that, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or no, that I don't really want to engage. But like saying that essentially is putting the decision in someone else's hands. Like,
use your vote, or others will decide for you.
Yeah, and that really that very much encapsulates it. Don't leave it to others. You decide. You vote. Get out there, please.
Yeah, and I can say here as well at this point, like if there's any doubt over, I know like for Midlands Northwest, my constituency, there's 27 candidates, so it's quite difficult to comb through them all and try and figure out even where to put anyone. You might know your number one, your number two, but then there's a bunch of other numbers you could put in there as well. There's the Palumba app that you can download, and it's made to be extremely easy and straightforward. It gives you questions one at a time. You say if you agree or disagree with a certain statement, and then at the end it will show you the statistics of what parties you most align with according to your stances on different political issues. And you can use that, you can look at it straight away and go, oh, this is who I'm voting for. You can think about it a bit more. There's also the primetime debates. I think primetime did a debate with the 8 of the South candidates and also Dublin candidates. And then the episode with Katie Hannon is the one with the Midlands Northwest. Obviously they're flawed because they don't show all of the candidates, but it does give you a good rundown of, people's stances, the party stances, and some of the independents. So it's a good way to go for just a bit of research if you're trying to figure out, land on your feet and figure out what you're doing on Friday.
And I think for context, Katie, if you really are dedicated to it, you can vote 1 to 27 in your constituency.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
unlikely.
that's
Now, it's probably, it could be it could be famous last words, but it's unlikely your number 27 will go that far. But stranger things have happened,
yeah.
I think that wraps up our last podcast
Okay.
episode, unless anyone wants to add anything real quick.
I think just a quick mention to some of the guys in the Together.eu group that were there to start, and a bit of work in the background that went on, like Anya and Lauren, and there's too many more to mention that had a keen that had input early on. Just to give an honourable mention to them, a lot of work they contributed, and I suppose especially to Thomas, who actually put the group together.
the founder. Yeah.
Yeah. Here.
Well, that wraps it up. So thank you to everyone for listening.